have also with us the ultimate sage. We have a person who knows this institution from the perspective of a student, a faculty member, a department chair, an associate dean of the graduate school, a provost, a chancellor, and a chancellor encore. In between the two chancellor stints, being president of the American Council on Education, he had an eye across all of higher education in the entire country and returns to his chancellor encore position, bringing that very broad national and international view. So as it is impossible to define all of the kinds of innovations that are a result of the many roles of leadership that this chancellor has provided for us. And in fact, this event, we would not be here today, there would not have been a Showcase #1 if it wasn't for his leadership at a time when the idea of quality improvement was quite a radical idea. So as our Chancellor Encore prepares to retire again, please welcome Chancellor David Ward.
Well, I have been labeled Chancellor Encore by the students. They didn't like the term interim. They thought it was pretty ugly. And since I was already Chancellor Emeritus, they thought it was a demotion. So they were the ones who came up with Encore. And the Encore is almost over. I do feel a little like now that I can declare myself to be a lame duck. But I'm a lame duck who can still fly. So here I am still flying. I'm delighted that Rebecca Blank will succeed me. I think it's a really terrific appointment. She also will bring even richer Washington experience than I brought back, being a cabinet secretary. Also, obviously acting or interim, I think will bring a remarkable sort of worldview or national view to what she's about, which I think is pretty important in this global situation. Having a narrow institutional view is not in any way a sensible way to go about things. You need to know the institutional culture, be a very good ethnographer, but having a sort of global vision I think is pretty important. The fact that she had the misfortune previously to teach at Michigan we'll forgive her for, but it is clear that it's an institution that's very, very like us in many respects. So I look forward to a very smooth transition. In some ways, when you're a chancellor for just 2 years, transition is the only word that you have to think about. And the most difficult thing for me was that in a period of change and challenge in higher education, you actually couldn't be transitional. You had to figure out something in a segmented way that would be a ramp to continued progress. And it would be a completely impossible situation to say, okay, we'll wait for the next leader to come on board. And I tried to think of areas that you would not predispose your successor to do things the way you do. You want, obviously, your successor to have the freedom to do what they want to do, but are there certain generic issues out there that we could really turn to? And I just chose 3 of them, the second or third day I arrived, that I felt it wouldn't really matter who followed me. They would be generic issues that may have a particular personal touch from a new leader, but the issues themselves would be, without question, necessary. First of these, I think, would be what I called educational innovation, not educational technology. A lot of people are sending me emails about MOOCs saying, all this technology will screw up quality and all of this. The word technology does not appear except as a second-order issue in how we innovate and improve. The word is innovation, educational innovation, not educational technology. Do you hear that? All right. Educational innovation. I'm getting abusive letters about educational technology. It's educational innovation. So even though technology is an important part of it. The second issue is what the provost, Paul DeLuca, and others have called discovery to product. The idea of translational research, but translational research that is not just licensing remotely largely the model of innovation that comes from the drug industry, but rather speed to market, largely as also in the hope of benefiting the local regional economy. And I think the D2P process, which is much broader than pharmaceuticals, will, over the next few days, get a great deal of publicity. I thought this might never happen while I was still Chancellor because we don't move fast. But in this case, we've been able to accelerate the process. And with a collaboration with SQUIB, the organization that handles retirement investments, and WARF have joined together to create a seed pool of capital for startups, and that we, with the help of the law school and the business school and WID, will provide one-stop shopping. Well, it may be more than one stop, but at least you could start with one-stop shopping, figure out the business and legal implications of a startup business, whether you're a student, staff member, whether you're a faculty member, or an entrepreneur in the community. So that was the second one, the whole idea of how do you deal with translational research. This is a Wisconsin idea. Some people argue it's the corrupt commercialization of our academic work. I just see it as trying to get our work out into the community as fast as possible. Again, we live in times in which everything you do has some polar reference. It's just a challenge of the political rhetoric of our time. And the third one was interdisciplinarity, in the sense that the 20th century was really an age of subdisciplinarity. Most of the great gains we made was digging deeper and deeper into mine shafts. And I think the 21st century, although we don't know the complete implications of this, is really the integration of knowledge in rather wider chunks, and it is the connectivity of knowledge, more in an 18th century sense than a 20th century sense, that seems to be defining where we are. And so interdisciplinarity, a kind of, I call it the federation movement within the infinite division of intellectual labor which we currently function in. The average size of department is perhaps barely 20. It's not really a size, it seems to me, in a 21st century sense, which creates an adequate dialogue variety for us to pursue what we want to pursue as a university. So those are the three areas, pretty uncomplicated, and I feel that all three of them have made some progress, and it presents a sort of ramp for my successor to take it in whatever way they see. I would also say that the response of deans, directors, chairs, and individual innovators in all three of these areas have been very impressive. I can't do this without individuals, in a sense, putting their own particular sort of trademark on what's going on. The challenge, in some ways, is somewhere in between what I might do and what individuals or small groups might do, and that's something which is very hard for institutions, particularly comprehensive research institutions, to do, which is to do things at the right scale. We sometimes call it scaling up, but it's not just scaling up in the sense of an enterprise model. It's finding the right scale for the right niche. Should this innovation be one person? Should it be a department? Should it be a subsection of a department? Should it be a college? In other words, there are a variety of innovations, and what we need to do is attach, cubed, squared, or some other exponent that describes the scaling that is implied by the innovation that we're following. Generally, innovation in a university is very eclectic and very individualized. Doesn't make it any less important, but you will see that almost anything under the title of educational innovation that I have recommended occur on campus already exists. But it exists with very tiny groups of individuals. And so the real question is, can we create a virus, if you like, that is sensitive to the expansion to the right scale, so that then the kind of progress and impact and performance outcomes that we look for can occur. And I think that's one of the issues that has been a theme for this group this year, is how can we scale more effectively. And it's a challenge in a comprehensive research university, as distinct from, say, a smaller four-year liberal arts college, because of the internal differentiation of who we are. And if there was anything that had an enormous impact on me when I returned between the year 2000 and the year 2012, it would be the differentiation that's now occurring between schools and colleges in their revenue flows, in how they themselves are trying to handle what they do, how they link to the infrastructure of the university. It used to be one size fits all was defined the relationship of chancellors, provosts, and deans. That is gone. It has to be a much more customized relationship, very sensitive to these variabilities in both revenue and purpose, and they're actually getting greater. It's not unlike, I think, the way we have to demand of the UW system, that campuses that are very different in mission and in scale between Superior and Madison, between Milwaukee and Stout, that they also need to be much more sensitive. And I believe one of my fourth goals was to redefine the system relationship in this campus by having them be much more conscious of mission variability, and in particular, when no other campus has certain things going on, there's no value added from the system, in which case this campus should link more directly with the board. There are three areas where that's pretty obvious: large-scale research, virtually a monopoly of that; athletics, we have a monopoly, big-time athletics, we have a monopoly of that; and healthcare, the idea of a hospital and a medical school. All of those three really require the leadership of the Madison campus to have very direct connections with the board, rather than, in a sense, moving through an intermediate group. It works, the intermediation works for undergraduate education, for dealing with public policy with respect to the state. But the same kind of thing is going on. The campuses of this system are now far more varied in their niche positioning within American higher education than they were 15 years ago. Let me now move to the issue also of what it is about educational innovation that I think needs to drive us as we now move forward. First of these is it's got to be part of our vision. And the problem with vision in higher education is it can be, the idealism can be rooted in past, a sense of reverence for the past, or it can be, in a sense, a more fabricated or imagined image of the future. And we are, in fact, in an intellectual environment in which there's still a lot of people who are so stressed by change that they really are idealizing a past that probably never existed. It might be the medieval university. It might be years at a collegiate environment. It might be a year in which allegedly everybody got their degree in 4 years. I don't know any historical data, even for this campus, where the 4-year graduation rate is any higher than it is now. It is higher at this campus now than any time in its history. And yet the past was supposed to be better, right? So there are many examples of assumptions about performance in the past that need to be very carefully reviewed. So I don't mind having past idealism as long as it's empirically validated. I was once a sort of historian, so I'm a little concerned about facts and history. But I think more promising for us is the future. And I think the future, in many respects, is a future that is defined by scale, global, and one defined by a transformation of communications, both personally and institutionally. If you take those two, it seems to me we're still functioning largely in the time and space of a 21st century framework. Student credit hours, classrooms that have to be used at only a certain time, and for most of the year not used at all. These are things that are really very challenging in a 21st century environment. So I think our vision has to be both respective but also critical of our past, but at the same time to have enough imagination to realize that the status quo is simply a very poor fit with what I call the mega trends of the 21st century. The second of these would be the idea of research-based outcomes. Just as we invent the past to meet our needs, I do think that the idea of not just alleging quality, but converting what is alleged quality into performance and outcomes is the way I think a researcher would do it. A researcher doesn't say it's quality because, oh, it feels that way. You usually have some conscious research design to try and get there. And what is going on in educational innovation is not the innovation just in the pedagogy, but we actually are seriously trying to figure out what the performance and outcomes are of such changes. So I think the idea of a research design or research-based improvement is pretty important. And if what we find is there is no improvement, and the main improvement is not savings of money, it is agitation of the brain cells, then I think we have to abandon them. And I think this is going to be a period of great experimentation. So the second one is research-based efforts to do innovation. And finally, I want to just repeat the thing I said earlier. Educational innovation includes, embraces, and uses technology, but any innovation, even if it excludes technology, is it simply a curricular redesign, something which uses the classroom in a different way, is educational innovation. MOOCs aren't the only way in which education will change. There is an enormous range between a traditional classroom, a flipped classroom, computer-assisted learning, and the use of the internet, distance delivery, all the way out to MOOCs. So I do want to stress that this is meant to be a very varied exposure to educational innovation. Yesterday, I had the privilege of giving out this year's Distinguished Teaching Awards to, I believe it was 10 individuals. What impressed me in their responses to receiving the award is how many of them talked about innovation. Very few of them talked about technology, even though they couldn't do what they did with technology. Their mental construct was the innovation itself, the means to which may or may not have been technology. I think 8 of them were very explicit about that. All of them, it was implicit. And and the range of subjects was from classics to chemical engineering. These were extraordinary faculty members who really had taken upon themselves to rethink the delivery of the content. And having rethought the delivery, even rethought the content itself. So the curriculum can change through innovation. There are feedback loops into the content. So that was important. And then just recently I was down in Chicago giving a talk to EDUCAUSE, which is, of course, the leading organization that's tried to cross-fertilize academic mission with technology. And I was impressed to know that they now have a new program, which is funded by the Gates Foundation, Vision for Post-Secondary Breakthrough Models. So they're trying to use the language of innovation more institutionally. And they have the idea of incubators. They're concerned, I'm sure, about scale. How do you scale? We've had so many false starts at the individual level. And I thought I'd just read you here. We hope incubator institutions will create and implement programs that, and these are design learning experiences, assessment, and feedback around specific course and degree program learning outcomes for subject matter, non-cognitive, and deeper learning competencies. 2, use learning science research to develop effective, targeted learning environments. 3, deploy blended, or supported online learning environments to increase personalization, engagement, and efficiency. Personalization. We're in a customized century, not a standardized century. Combine online and face-to-face components to make learning more effective and affordable, particularly for low-income and minority students who might especially benefit from the support of interpersonal interaction blended with individualized technology-enabled instruction. It's a kind of social statement, not a technological statement. Deliver targeted, customized supports to improve retention and completion with limited resources. There is a kind of resource issue being woven in here. Use learning analytics and performance management systems to deliver quality, affordability, and continuous improvement. Enable secondary school students to gain college credit or otherwise ease the transition from high school to post-secondary learning, taking advantage of the capability of technology to enable bridging between secondary and post-secondary education that may accelerate students' progression towards the completion of a degree. And finally, be allowed sufficient autonomy and flexibility to incorporate innovations in areas such as the use of time, the role of instructors and other staff, and instructional delivery and business models. I actually thought that was a pretty complete summary of what might be the package we're talking about. There is, of course, in this an enormous possibility of creating, through self-help, for our own control of our own improvements, a situation in which we can perhaps reverse, modify what is a great skepticism among our critics, particularly our intelligent critics, who see us as not really having a change agenda, as waiting for some pendulum of resources to swing back upwards so that there will be more for us to do things. Ultimately, the challenge of this is we will have to do it with old money, or money we currently have, or money we get from strategic sources. The likelihood that this will be done by waiting around for new general sources of funding, whether tuition or state revenue, is unlikely. And so in some senses, the challenge is not just the vision, but also recognizing that we have to take charge of that vision ourselves and largely do it to ourselves with resources that we currently have. Now, I think there are going to be foundations out there, and there are going to be strategic reinvestments by the state, and there are going to be students who will agree to modest changes in tuition, but not as an entitlement, only as a targeted investment in educational innovation. So this, I think, may have to be piloted with our own resources. But if the pilot is successful, I think then revenues will flow in a strategic sense. So I think we're in exciting times because we are in charge of where we want to go. Don't let others define it. We know what is the educational model will work for us. And I think by being hopeful, a little bit more future-orientated, and recognizing that this is about educational innovation, not just money and technology, I think we have a great chance to transform what higher education looks like in the next 5 to 10 years. I really hope that that's the course that we're on, and I really do think that the great universities that I came to know as president of ACE are really well established on this course. And it was my fear that we needed to be parallel and aligned with the most progressive institutions that made me push educational innovation of the first of my 3 priorities. So that's my sermon. I'm allowed to give sermons, by the way, because I'm on my way out. Thank you very much.